hadn't been on the road for long when something caught my eye and made me shiver. It was Edgar. He was on his knees in the mud, next to his daughter, who neither moved nor spoke. She had been killed by some roaming bandit. The rain couldn't wash the pain away, and as I listened to the mourning father, I felt a coldness spread deep inside me. In my search for relief, I rode north. There I came upon a camp of outlaws, which I tore into in my desperation for anything but this hellish cold within. It was here that I found a way to kindle my weapon. What was this world, if not an infected wound? I realized I could cleanse it and end the howls of suffering. It needed to be scorched. In the wake of my frenzied realization, I rode into the wild, wanting to burn this world to a cinder. It was at this point that I entered a forest and came upon a shadowy rotunda. Some sort of wizardry was afoot, causing its large doors to open on their own. Amused, I entered the corridor and stepped onto a platform, which began to move down, but for how long I could not tell. Finally, I saw something. Buildings appeared under an alien sky. There was, if I were to believe my eyes, another world down here. Then it came fully into view, and I was flabbergasted. Above imposing and seemingly ancient structures, there was a vast sky full of stars. What was this strange place? And more importantly, where was I? Who had made these crumbling buildings, and where were they? In this ruin I came upon some peculiar creatures. Unreal as it seemed, they were made from clay instead of flesh. What a curious thing, condemned to walk for all eternity, guarding forgotten ruins under unseen stars. Riding through a dark and watery ravine, I was almost eaten by an enormous crab, and the air was full of tension. Finally, we arrived at a wide open space, but we were not by any means prepared for the sight that followed. About a mile away, large pillars stood next to a majestic and ancient stairway, and even more eerie, one could see a brightly glowing palace in the sky. This tranquil realm was clearly devoid of wickedness. It was at this point that I noticed a brazier. It was meant to be lit. By doing so, I apparently also ignited one of the pillars by the stairway. I followed the light into a ruinous temple, empty but for a large carcass of what had once been a glorious elk. It seemed I had to light every brazier in this peaceful wilderness. Surely it would be a pleasant stroll. It was not. This ethereal land turned out to be a deceptive illusion, plagued by shimmering globes of death, nightmarish crabs from hell itself, degenerate archers, and axe-wielding inbred mongrels. At the end of that dreadful day, I had managed to light them all. Upon touching the glowing carcass, I saw something not of this world. I was transported to a silent cavern in which an enormous elk slowly began walking toward me. The sound of its hooves could be heard clearly. Then it took off, jumped through the very air, and came down upon me. Such breathtaking power, this being had an inscrutable beauty. The magnificence of it made me gasp. I did not want to kill this noble creature. Why did it attack? When I finally delivered the killing blow to this majestic animal, I was pierced by a deep sorrow within as it gave one final roar. In the silence that followed the killing, I came upon a message written in glowing letters. It said, "Be wary of sadness." Feeling sick at heart over the needless killing, I began the journey back. After one last glimpse at the underground city, we finally rode under the rainy clouds of Limgrave. Chance took me to an abandoned church with a statue, clearly depicting a holy woman of great importance. In this overgrown ruin, I found a strengthening substance and a wondrous golden flask, promising great powers. Taking a moment to study it all, I noticed a peculiar light in some bushes nearby. And just like that, I found myself in another land entirely, plagued by a giant gargoyle waiting in silence, a suffocating sky, and foul winds. What had I done? Terrified by this rotting wasteland, I sneaked back to the intimidating building. Much to my dismay, I discovered that someone was already here, in this surprisingly warm shelter. It turned out to be a gruesome being, hunched over and growling like a beast. It did not utter one word, but merely snarled. I could not take this anymore and fled the otherwise comfortable hall. Running through the wilderness, I was attacked by small vicious critters, and it felt like the very air itself wanted to infect me with the wretched sickness of this land. Finally, I came to a large bridge and was confronted with a terrifying sight, and to think that I, days before, had considered Castle Morn hell. Looking back, I saw petrified monstrosities, frozen for all eternity in stone pillars. What horrifying cataclysm had done this?